All right, man. Episode 36 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on December 3rd, 2022. The time is 12:30 a.m. So this is the first episode we're being recorded in the dark. That's right, man. You look outside and it's just a black void. No lights, no sounds, but the random animals in the distance, man. We had two deers in our yard today, man. It was great seeing them. Just seeing them wander around, eat the remainder of the pumpkin that we had out. It was beautiful, man. It's truly beautiful. Got the cat sleeping right over here, man. He's as comfy as ever. It's getting colder out, you know. These nights, during the day, it's manageable. The nights are a little trickier. This is the perfect weather to stay in, enjoy a hot beverage, get under the blanket. Man, I tell you, the other night, I was watching a film. I had the cat over by my side. I was under the blanket. Couldn't beat it, man. Couldn't beat that for the world. It was perfect, man. A lot of time's going to be spent indoors this time of the year. Not going to be going out a whole lot. Got to keep ourselves warm and heated. Got to take in some good literature, some good films. But we're also going to stay focused on the writing. Not going to let any kind of weather drag us down, man. We're going to get the work done. Jeez Louise, man. I just saw that there's a new documentary on Netflix. It's going to have to be watched for sure about Robert Downey Sr. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know it was today. Or I guess yesterday, actually. Technically the second. So that's definitely going to be watched. Robert Downey Sr. is such an interesting filmmaker. I've only seen one of his films, Putney Swope, which is a film I like a lot. And he's a filmmaker who I have been meaning to dive into more of his work. And whenever I see a documentary about a specific artist, a filmmaker, or such, it immediately makes me want to dive into their work, make it a priority. You guys see the De Palma documentary that came out a while ago? I think Noah Baumbach did that, to my knowledge. That was great. Went through all of his films. I think that was recorded. That was filmed probably sometime before or during when he was making his last film that I am blanking on the name on. What is it? Passion, I think it was called. I should look that up. I don't remember what year that came out, but he talked about all of his other films except for that one, because I think the last one he did before that was The Black Dahlia in 2006. That's right. He did Passion in 2012. Did a film Redacted in 2007, which I'm not familiar with. He, to my knowledge, did not talk about that in the documentary, as well as he has apparently had a film since that I wasn't familiar with, a film Domino from 2019 that was unaware of until this very moment. So that'll have to be watched at some point as well. Brian De Palma as well, very interesting filmmaker. The evolution of his career from his early work with De Niro making, you could say, French New Wave inspired films. I would say specifically Hi Mom feels the most French New Wave inspired. It's a very cool film. Of the three, the three with De Niro being Greetings, The Wedding Party, and Hi Mom. Uh, uh, all three of them, I think, have their own merits for sure. I think The Wedding Party is my favorite of the three. It's got a very relaxed, laid-back attitude. There are just the comedy in the film doesn't totally work for me, admittedly, but there are just some great, surprisingly tender moments in the film. There's a sequence that specifically always stuck out to me. We have the main character in the film and his fiance, and they are together in this little bungalow area inside with all these pillows, and it's a very comforting, warm scene. Not literally warm, as in surface level. They are warm. The characters are warm in this situation, but warm for the heart, for the soul, you know. And Hi Mom as well, I think, is very cool. It goes in a bunch of different directions. Gets very cinema verite at one point. It's a cool film for sure. and then he would later on do the works that he'd be most remembered for. Films like Sisters, Phantom of the Paradise, Carrie, later stuff like Blowout, which is probably my favorite of his work. That and Phantom of the Paradise, but Blowout definitely number one. But also Scarface, and even his later work I think is interesting as well. I don't think it's a lot of filmmakers tend to either a lot of legendary filmmakers who continuously direct tend to either burn out or fade away. It's very rare of a filmmaker whose work is consistent over a long period of time, which is understandable. You can't really compare. You can't really expect a filmmaker to be making these kinds of films again and again. The Hal Ashby documentary is one that actually makes that point pretty well. They talk about a lot of Hal Ashby's films, which is again a documentary you definitely should see. It's called Hal, which I watched on Amazon Prime a little while ago. But they have Ben Foster narrating letters written by Hal Ashby, and they talk about his prime films like The Landlord and Harold the Maude, and a lot of those films. And it ends with Being There. And even though he did films after that, but primarily that's where they stop, kind of like as a farewell to that era of his work. And actually, recently I just watched The Last Detail, which is a terrific film. That one just recently got a 4K from Shout Factory, and I had the Indicator Blu-ray of that. I believe that was Indicator who put that out. It's a Region 2 release. Fantastic film. One of the best of recent memory for sure. Good stuff, man. You got to check out some of these documentaries. So after this is done, that will definitely be watched either tonight or tomorrow. Tomorrow being daylight, of course. Not tomorrow as in the next day. Because sleep's got to get done, man. You got to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Because without it, you're going to wake up and have nothing to... your brain's not going to be running at full speed, man. You try to wake up in the morning and, you didn't get enough sleep, or you're not eating breakfast. You try to, you can't remember half the things you want to do that day. It ends up all just fading away, and God only knows you get it back, man. So sleep's important. I definitely am not getting as much sleep as I should, but it is important for sure. Just mental and physical health, man. But geez, I was thinking recently, it's funny how one thing kind of jumps to another. So I was listening to an interview with Tarantino. It was an interview from 2021, around the time that the novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the book came out, which is a fantastic book, by the way. I mean, the film itself is amazing, but the book as well is also really incredibly well written. It's a very fun read, a very quick read. It's a book, one of those books you just can't put down, man. You just get totally engaged and enticed with all the characters. But there was a mention of the book that was put out, I believe, a couple of years ago. The full title of it is, I am not going to be able to remember the full title. It's Manson, the CIA, the Secret History of the 60s, or something along those lines. But the author, they had mentioned that in the podcast. So I looked up an interview with the author, was listening to an interesting interview with him about the development of his book, the strained relationship he had with Vince Bugliosi. I think is how you say his name, who famously wrote Helter Skelter, and which is a book that I have not finished, but I read most of, and it was a very interesting book. It was one that moved along at a very good pace. It played out like a film in a lot of ways. It had a lot of backstory in it, and kind of puts everything into perspective, and a good, manageable read. But hearing this interview and the questionable choices, a book I have not read yet. The book is called Chaos, by the way. I don't that's it goes Chaos and Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the '60s, I believe is the full title. But it made me think about some of the films that had come out about Manson, because I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood generated a lot of. I mean, the thing with Manson is that that's just. I mean, that whole situation, the Tate LaBianca murders, has been talked about to death. I mean, the uh, the pure amount of speculation and talk and what I was leading into is the films that come out of that and the films inspired from that, from hippies, cult of hippies who end up terrorizing others. You have films like Snuff and I Drink Your Blood, these kind of hippies gone wild sort of films. Snuff is, that book I talked about a little while ago, Killing for Culture, has some great tidbits on Snuff about the production of that film and most interestingly about the release of the film and the marketing and stuff. If I talked about that book a whole bunch of times on the show, but if you haven't read that book, man, you seriously need to get on that because that is a truly fantastic book that must be read. But I Drink Your Blood is a very enjoyable film. It's a film that it's just completely wild. It's these hippies who eat these meat pies that get infected with rabies because they're messing around, man, and they're just being bad to like these people. And it's great seeing these '70s films as a response. But what I'd mentioned before to the '70s kind of nihilistic response to the end of the '60s. Films like Joe, for example, with Peter Boyle, I think is directed by John Avildsen. I did not know that. I want to double check that so I don't mess myself up. But John Avildsen, man, I had no idea directed the film. For whatever reason, I just never crossed. But you know what? If I can get this page up here from there we go. Yeah, man, John Avildsen. It makes so much sense too. The way the characters act, the very the way that John Avildsen directs characters, man, or directs actors, very naturalistic. Feels very free but still scripted. He's really great with actors, man. Sorry, get the chair here. But what I was saying before is that a lot of the Manson films that those ones were what I was talking about. Snuff and I Drink Your Blood were directly, inspired by the hippies gonna run amok. The turning of the turning of the tides. But um, I'm looking at films like I'm trying to think that came out. I mean, you have Helter Skelter from that was a TV film, which I haven't seen, man. You have tons of documentaries too. The documentary Manson, I think, is from '71, to my knowledge. I'm not gonna keep typing these in and look these up, but that was one that I don't think has ever had a very good release. It's on YouTube, and it's one that I've been wanting to watch. But I think that was one of the first ones to come out or something. But one of the films that I'd seen a little while ago, which is a very interesting film, man. It's a film called The Other Side of Madness. It came out, I believe, while the case was still going on. It's an experimental film for sure. Very heavy. You guys gotta forgive me for this chair, man. I'm like leaning back a bit. You can probably hear that. But it's an experimental type of film, and it's very interesting. The narrative, how it's done. It's like I think it was, to my knowledge, I believe it was filmed some of it on Spawn Ranch. There's sequences. We have bands playing and hippies kind of hanging out and not doing a whole lot. My memory is a little foggy of the film. It's also early in the morning, so forgive me if I don't get my details exactly correct. But it's got a real cool vibe. It got a really at first kind of you let your guard down, very chilled kind of vibe, and then you get into a recreation of the horrific Tate murders. And surprisingly enough, from what I can remember, I believe it actually got most of the information correct. I don't know how much of the information was readily available at that time because there's a lot of speculation on what was going on and who did what, causes of everything. But if you have an opportunity to see that film, it's worth a watch for sure. I think it also includes some of Manson's song, or a Manson song in the film. I know at the Blu-ray that came out, I don't remember who put out the Blu-ray, but it came with a CD that had it. I think one or two songs that Manson did. Um, just real wild stuff, man. It's sort of like the way I see it. Um, at this point, I think after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's kind of like it kind of really puts the whole thing in perspective because it's sort of like the Tarantino in that film kind of not it's not specifically about Manson and his all the hippies and all that then is the family, but it really on without spoiling anything for those who haven't seen it still, it really kind of puts things on a into perspective. I mean, these weren't the brightest of people, man. They were all taking drugs and they're all messed up. They had this unrealistic output of life, man. And when you get to a certain point, these characters just seem clueless. They seem not quite buffoons, but they're not prepared for what they get themselves into a fantastic third act. I mean, not just on the big final sequence of the film. I don't mean literal final sequence. I mean, the big sequence in the third act. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But just I love the whole build up to that. I love everything leading up to it. And it's a film that I read that Tarantino, he made a statement where he talked about that he was able to that he views, I'm going to be misquoting him a bit, but I'm going to try to get the point best I could, is that he was attempting to disassociate the name of Sharon Tate and Charles Manson together as kind of like giving Sharon Tate the spotlight again without having the baggage of this horrific situation. And and I think unfortunately it's a case where I don't think that's ever gonna happen because it's too synonymous, man. It's unfortunately it's something that is out of the public conscious is always gonna associate that. But what I was getting at before I got kind of sidetracked is that these people who seem to be otherworldly and larger than life really were just kind of losers, man. Losers who unfortunately got infamous for this horrific act. But there's a moment in the film that that actually wasn't in the film, but I wish that Tarantino had kept in. It's a little moment, but would have I think it helped the scene a lot. It's a scene in the film where so Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, is on the roof fixing an antenna, and he sees Charles Manson walk up to the Tate Polanski residence, and they don't have any kind of interaction. But in the deleted scene, Manson comes back down, waves to Cliff. Cliff doesn't react, like, who's this guy? And Manson has a total like meltdown and starts screaming and yelling. It's like, hey, and it's just a great, like, that moment right there, man, shows that, I mean, this guy, he could be suave one second and then just completely out of his mind the next, like just loses it over this, like just this guy not waving to him. It's perfect, man, and kind of shows how ridiculous of a person this guy was, And on the podcast as well, it was interesting. Tarantino had his own idea about sort of motivations as to why, that night that it happened. He says that he doesn't believe that Manson had sent them out, Tex Watson and the other girls whose names I don't remember right now, Linda Kasabian and gosh, I don't remember the names, I apologize. He says that he doesn't think they were sent there to kill, but it just went wrong. And actually the author of the book Chaos, I believe, said something along the lines of something about I don't want to misquote him, but something about thinks it was a drug deal gone bad, or maybe that's not what he said. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's all very interesting, man. I find all that whole situation interesting, but it's also interesting to see the films that come out of it, not just of the whole Manson situation, but really of any kind of true crime, any sort of big event that happens. It's sort of like it's interesting to see what films are come off as exploitive and making a buck off of a tragedy, or of films that are actually trying to tell a story. I mean, there was talk when that recent Dahmer miniseries came out on Netflix. Some people said it was exploitive. Some people said it was not. I never watched it. I don't watch TV, and also I had no interest in it. I don't really care about. I've seen Dahmer films, and I think I know the story pretty well. I don't really care to see another, unless there's something new about it. I don't really care about another Dahmer show. Um, if it was a film, maybe, but I'm not gonna devote 10 or so hours to something I have no interest in. It's completely reductive and pointless, man. But last weekend I was talking briefly about Star 80, and speaking of Tarantino as well, I actually went and listened to the Video Archives episode where Tarantino and Roger Avery talk about Star 80 and their uneasiness towards the film, of feeling sort of not having a complete feeling on it, feeling kind of bringing up some of the points I thought of just, is it exploitive, is it not? And I think it is and it isn't. You know, a film like that, I oftentimes, I feel weird about a film like that showing, because, all right, with the Dorothy Stratton case, man, it's a horrific tragedy where you have her boyfriend, manager, whose name I'm blanking on right now. Better off not give him the spotlight, but you know, it was a murder suicide, and the only two people who know what happened in that situation are the two people who aren't with us anymore. And all, you know, they were found naked and bloodied. I think they were on top of each other or something. So it feels weird watching the film, and the film makes its own interpretation. Now, granted, the film is inspired by these events. It's not trying to be a literal based on a true story, but when it comes to real people, man, it feels peculiar. Is Bob Fosse trying to tell the real story, or is he trying to make a buck? And I don't know, and I'm not gonna speak for him. You know, you gotta let the film and him speak for themselves, man. But I feel the same way even about another film I like a lot, Monster from 2003, 2003 or four, and that's a film where I'd seen a documentary on. I've seen actually two documentaries, I think, maybe one or two, on Eileen Wuornos, the serial killer, and how a lot of the cases, you know, she was, I mean, Eileen Wuornos was known to be a liar, contradict herself, either intentionally or unintentionally. We don't know. I mean, a lot of her stories change. So I always felt weird about that film showing the murders where we don't know what happened, man. I mean, we're taking it for what it is. We're taking her word for it, and she's an unreliable narrator. So it feels weird, man. Was the film made to capitalize on a sensational name like that, or was it made to tell the interesting story? And I think it's a very good film, don't get me wrong, but cases like that I always feel a little iffy about. But with that said, you know, I don't want to speak for the films. It feels, you know, you got to judge on a film by film basis, man. It's all in the eye of the beholder whether or not you feel comfortable watching certain films based on true crimes. And how do you believe there should be X amount of time waited or not? I mean, a film like Patriots Day, for example. I mean, with Mark Wahlberg, about the Boston Marathon bombing, which came out like right after, man. I mean, it was pretty soon. What was that? 2017, I think. And you know what, man? And I don't know. I mean, again, that's a good film as well. Is it too soon? I don't know, man. It's completely subjective. And why do we look at older films in a different light, like the Helter Skelter film, or what's the Mark Harmon Ted Bundy film, or Guyana Cult of the Damned? These films made quickly after tragedies, and you know, it's an interesting conversation to have, and I've brought it up with acquaintances before, and we haven't really reached a real conclusion, and I don't think we ever will. But then again, you have situations like the film Zodiac, 2007, directed by David Fincher, which is a film that is not necessarily about trying to find an identity of the Zodiac killer, but it's a film about obsession, a film about a person who this case was, in the grand scheme of things, is relatively small case in comparison. and the obsession that it leads to about not getting an answer. And the film brings that up. They bring up the fact that because it jumps, I mean, because it spans over a long period of time. And they mentioned the film how in San Francisco all these, these other horrific murders happened, and why he gets so fixated on just this one. And I think it is just about not knowing. And going back to the Manson stuff, it's sort of like there's a lot that we don't know about the case, man, and there's a lot that we'll never know. I mean, time is passing, man. There's a lot of stuff we gotta accept we're never gonna find out. What was the true motive? Did Manson tell him to go into the Tate house to kill everybody, or did he just tell him to, just was it, like Tarantino said, that it was just going to be a creepy crawl or drug dealers, or was it Tex's idea to kill them all, or who knows, man? And I mean, we'll never know. You can get wrapped up in any conspiracy like that. I mean, they found I don't know if this is actually confirmed or not, but the author of the Chaos novel was saying they found a film reel in the house that was of Polanski and Sharon Tate having sex, and that Polanski he came back and got it or something like that, but then he also people speculated that it was Polanski forcing Tate Sharon to have sex with someone else. Man, we're not going to know. I mean, time is passing every second, every day. 26 minutes has passed right now. Are you kidding me, man? It's all fascinating, but I think the art that comes out of that is just as fascinating. It's two completely different reactions to these horrific cases, but you take a step back and you go, what art comes out of these tragedies, Then you get a film like The Zodiac Killer, which I believe that came out when that case was still going on. That's an interesting story as well. They made that film, to my knowledge, to try to get the Zodiac Killer to come see it. And they had these cards, or they'd have you write down who you think the Zodiac Killer is after the film, and they thought they would catch the killer that way by matching the handwriting, and they never did. And even recently, when they thought they had the real guy, and but then there was some ambiguity behind some of it. I mean, that's why, with the film Zodiac, what David Fincher does so brilliantly with the film is that every time, and I've seen the film a couple times now. I think I've seen it about 3 times. It's one of my favorite films. It's a complete masterpiece. But it does so brilliantly. It tricks you, man, because at the end of the day they don't catch him. But you watch the film and it makes you believe that it is possible. In the context of this film, they can find him, and there are leads that they have, and ultimately, a lot of the real suspects, to my knowledge, have either died or have gone nowhere. So the film does, man, it does the impossible, and it tricks you in the best possible way. It tricks you in the way where by the third act you're going, man, I can solve this case. These people are going to solve this case, and it's just ultimately what I'm trying to say is you haven't seen the film, you got to see it, man. I think it might be my favorite David Fincher film, to be honest. Geez, I did not mean to talk about all this true crime stuff. This is because the funny thing is, I'm not even a big true crime guy. It doesn't interest me a whole lot. I think mostly the films about these situations interest me more. It's all wild, man. Yeah. Geez, that's all I got for this, man. So I'm gonna check out that Robert Downey Sr. documentary now. Actually, I don't know if I'm gonna finish it now because I'm going to bed in a little bit. But man, gotta check that out. So we're gonna have a good weekend. We're gonna get a lot done, man. Like every weekend, we're not gonna waste it. The end of the year is coming up. We're gonna look back on this year and go and ask ourselves: did we accomplish what we intended to accomplish? Only you can answer that for yourself, man. And I'm gonna see if I can answer that for myself. You guys take care. Eat well, drink well. Have a good weekend. I'll come back next week and I'll